Welcome in, Hokies fans, to this edition of the Tech Sideline podcast. We record on Tuesday, September 20th, and we have a jam-packed 2-in-1 episode for you on this short week for Hokies football. On episode 256 of the Tech Sideline podcast, we'll look back at the Hokies win against Wofford on Saturday in Lane Stadium. Then in the second half, we look ahead to the battle for the Black Diamond Trophy between Virginia Tech and West Virginia on Thursday night. All of that and much more coming up on episode 256 of the Tech Sideline podcast, which starts right now. Welcome into episode 256 of the Tech Sideline podcast. Going to be a fun one. Was just saying it's going to be the most ambitious crossover event in Tech Sideline podcast history. We're going to change hosts. We're going to change panelists. We're going to make sure that you get everything you need from the Wofford game, but also looking ahead to Thursday against West Virginia. Before we get started, want to remind you that Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company, one of the nation's leading community banks. First Bank and Trust is a nationally ranked community-focused bank with over 30 locations throughout Virginia and Northeast Tennessee, with an additional presence in North Carolina. They offer free checking with industry-leading mobile banking, financing solutions for personal, agriculture, business, commercial, and mortgage needs, and more. Visit www.firstbank.com to learn more. We have got a great show coming up for you. We're going to start with Wofford before moving on to the big game on Thursday night in Lane Stadium. First, let's introduce everybody on set. To my right, Chris Coleman, lead analyst and columnist for Tech Sideline, and he has found his shirt. Everybody can see.
Everything's changing at the halfway point of the podcast except my shirt.
We are going to run around at the break, but yes, we've been talking about trying to find the Breathe If You Hate West Virginia shirt.
Found it. Imagine that it was in a drawer.
Just in time, too. Across the way for the first half, it's David Cunningham, managing editor for Tech Sideline. In the fourth chair for the first half, it's Katie Adams. We are going to swap at the halfway point, and I'll take over in the fourth chair. Behind the scenes, Jack Brizendine is the producer today with some assistance from Nick Brown, and I'm your host, Jake Lyman. Let's get started, guys. Let's start with the Wofford game on Saturday in Lane Stadium. Maybe not the most exciting game you're ever going to see, but it was a pretty packed crowd for an 11 a.m. game against Wofford. It felt like a pretty solid atmosphere, at least at the beginning.
I was very impressed. Like, I parked and I walked through Center Street to get to Lot 2, and I was like, man, this seems like a pretty good atmosphere for an 11 o'clock game. Then you get in the stadium, and it was kind of a late arriving crowd, but once they got in there, I mean, it was, I would not have guessed there had been 62,000 people there for that early of a game. And maybe it was embellished slightly, but at the same time, like, UVA got 40,000 for Old Dominion, right? And there's no way there didn't look like 40,000 in there. I mean, that hill was empty when they kicked the game-winning field goal. So I thought it was a very impressive turnout, and obviously Thursday night's going to be even more impressive.
Yeah, I think all things considered, an 11 a.m. kickoff, Tech fans did well. Showed out. I was impressed with the students, at least the ones that came out, because by halftime the student section was kind of empty. But I also completely understand the students want to go back and get lunch, like after probably barely eating breakfast.
Yeah, I was when I walked back to my car, there were so many outdoor tailgates going on. People having a good time outdoors with TVs, watching other games.
Yeah, in the parking
lots. And it was such a beautiful day outside. That's fine. Take a little break before West Virginia. Save your voice.
And it was nice. Game was over before 2 o'clock. You get out of the stadium.
Fast.
You have the rest of the day. There was some great college football the rest of the night.
Tech ran the ball so much, and then they completed such a high percentage of their passes, over 70% of their passes, I think. So the clock hardly ever stopped in that game. So I thought it was ideal. It was ideal, I think. It was almost like a scrimmage being played with a running clock.
Yeah, that's the thing. Tech's game was almost over. Tech's game was over like when most of the noon games were halfway through or starting the third quarter. Like, that was nice. You got to get out of there, go watch the 3:30 kickoffs and everything else after that, and It was a pretty good, entertaining weekend of college football, too.
Definitely. And speaking of the atmosphere, Will Stewart, who's going to join for the second half, he got a nice video of Enter Sandman that's on our YouTube page. Make sure you check that out. Field level, got to see everything from Johnny Cash all the way to the crowd singing after they cut the music off. So make sure you check that out as well. Let's talk about the game, though. Was this game kind of what we expected? The defense was good, made one mistake on a big play and allowed Wofford to score their first points of the year. And the offense, obviously still working through some things, but showed some good flashes that maybe lead into West Virginia.
You know, the scoreline, could have been worse, of course. Now, in fairness, that Wofford touchdown came after a play in which I thought they clearly fumbled.
Yep.
And so I don't think they should have had the ball to score. But, I guess I could be wrong. So offensively, it was one of those weird games where, like, if you look at, I talked about available yards in a Friday Q&A last week, and available yard percentage is like, let's say you start on your own 20-yard line. That means you have 80 available yards in front of you because that's how many yards it is to the end zone, and you gain, 60 of those yards. Whereas, let's say you force a turnover and you only have to go 40 yards for a touchdown. You don't have as many total yards as the other team, but you have 100% available yards percentage. Well, Virginia Tech in the first half against Wofford had a 79% available yards percentage. That would have actually ranked first in the country last year. They were moving the football in the first half. It's just, when things get condensed, the closer you get to the end zone, there's less space to maneuver in. So you've got to be more precise with your run blocking, and you need playmakers to break tackles. And that's not where Tech is an offense right now. So I thought they improved. Certainly in the passing game, they improved between the 20s, but they've got to get better the closer they get to the end zone because they'll need more offensive production to beat these teams coming up on their schedule.
Yeah, I thought the defense was what you'd expect. Chris Marv was calling plays late in the game. Yeah, and I had one or two people ask me if it was the series that Wofford scored on, and I believe so. But you also have to think that it was all the backups that were in at that point too. So it was kind of a whole collection of things. And the game was already put away at that point. It was 27-0. But I thought the offense. Looked better. Yes, you're obviously playing an FCS opponent, but the fact that Jaden Blue, Christian Moss, 11 different guys caught a pass, that is an intriguing part of this offense, which is something we haven't seen. Caleb Smith caught a couple passes and then got nicked up again. And whether or not, I from everything, it sounds like he's going to be fully healthy for West Virginia on Thursday, but you need other options behind him. And to see a Christian Moss catch 5 passes, to see a Jaden Blue come out of the woodwork and catch 4 passes in the fashion that he did, tiptoeing down the sideline or toe tapping and jumping high over the middle and catching a pass. Tech moved the ball, and I liked the way Wells distributed it. I thought Grant Wells had a pretty good game and kind of saw the field well. Now it's kind of just putting that finishing touch on. When you get to the red zone, you have to be able to convert. When you're playing against West Virginia or North Carolina or any of these teams who probably have a better offense than they do a defense, where you have to capitalize on your opportunities. And Virginia Tech didn't do it exactly right 100% of the time against Wofford, but you hope when Keyshawn King comes back and Caleb Smith's fully healthy that this is a team that can do that, especially if the run blocking improves.
Yeah, I thought the passing game improved in that, the passing game is all about timing and trust. And I thought the timing was much better. And Grant Wells showed some serious trust in his receivers, particularly Jaden Blue on the sideline catch.
Yeah.
And also the 3rd and long up the seam, where he just threw it up between 2 defenders and depended on Blue to go up and get it. And you have to have wide receivers who can make plays for your quarterback like that, and you have to have a quarterback who trusts your receivers to make those plays. I was watching some highlights this morning of the 2017 Virginia Tech-West Virginia game, and there were similar plays in that game where Josh Jackson just trusted Cam Phillips, and Phillips made the plays for him. There's only so many plays you can call as an offensive coordinator or a play caller. You got to have some dudes out there to make plays for you. That's just the way it is. So I think they took it. Granted, it's Wofford, but I saw a trust factor that maybe wasn't there earlier in the season, and maybe a healthier Jaden Blue than we saw before. Because if you remember, he only played 10 snaps against Boston College. He missed most of the preseason with an injury. So that's a good sign. Regardless of opponent, that's a good sign. So hopefully that's something they can keep moving forward in. And obviously Christian Moss targeting him early and often. 5 catches, 50 yards. I think he's got the highest ceiling of any wide receiver in that room. And I forget the exact number, but I think he was on the field for 12 or 13 passing plays, and he got a pass on 5 of them. That's a really, really high percentage.
Yeah, and I think they targeted Nick Gallo, the tight end, a lot too. I mean, when you have 11 different guys catch a pass, I feel like that's just a pretty impressive number. In general, it shows that you're spreading the ball around, and Grant Wells and Brent Pry both said after the game that this is kind of what they want the offense to be, assuming they have the guys that can make the plays. And as you were just talking about, if you plug a healthy Caleb Smith into this offense and a healthy Keyshawn King, hopefully that's what it looks like against West Virginia, and it might look completely different.
And it felt like going into the season, wide receiver depth or target depth was the issue, that maybe Grant Wells doesn't have enough people to throw to. But you mentioned 11 guys catch a pass. Maybe if Christian Moss can maybe slide into that wide receiver 3 role behind Blue and Smith, feels like it's starting to grow with this offense, and you hope that they peak at this tough stretch coming up.
And you keep hoping for something out of Dewan Lofton, right? Because he was the guy. Fuente sat in that chair last year and called him a stud. And every player and every coach you talked to this preseason was like, oh, yeah, he's really good and he's going to have a breakout year. Like literally every player I asked, what player on offense is going to break out this year? A young guy that maybe fans don't know a lot about. Every single one of them said Lofton. All of them. So there has to be something there, right? Some people have said he looks gimpy. I don't know. But I do know that if he is 100%, I think he's capable of producing more than he has so far. So Thursday night would be a good time to turn it on, I would say.
Yeah. So Tech completed 28 passes. Christian Moss had 5 receptions. Nick Gallo had 5. Jaden Blue had 4. Stephen Gosnell, Jalen Holston had 3 each. Caleb Smith and Dewan Lofton had 2. And then Jalen Jones, Connor Blumerick, William Kakavitsis, and Will's favorite, Bryce Duke, on the wheel route, the touchdown. They each had 1 catch. So I like the way, obviously, some of those guys are not going to be impact guys. I think a guy like Jalen Jones is still progressing, and he's not ready to catch 5 passes in a game like Christian Moss is. But to have a guy like Bryce Duke, his first ever big snaps, catches a wheel route pass for a touchdown, it goes back to that trust. And Grant Wells, after the game, I asked Grant Wells about it, and I asked Bryce Duke about it. And Grant Wells was like, I trusted Bryce Duke was going to make the play. Like, I just believed in him. And Bryce Duke was like, no, I mean, I knew I was going to make it. Like,
he was wide open. You better make it.
Yeah. Well, but that's the kind of thing you have to have. And I think Tech does have it. And a guy like Tech didn't really get involved was Connor Blumerick. So I also think through the first 3 games, Tech has been not completely, but sort of vanilla. And this is obviously a game where you don't need to be vanilla anymore because it actually matters.
Yeah, I guess we can talk about the elephant in the room, and that's the running game. And the run blocking needs to get better across the board. It was better in some instances. Drake Dulius was a lot better this past game than he was the first couple games. How much better they actually were, because you're taking it in Wofford into account. I don't know, but certainly needs to take a step forward on Thursday. But really, a big issue on Saturday was running backs not forcing any missed tackles, either by running through tackles or juking guys. And, so 31 combined carries between Jalen Holston and Chance Black, 0 forced missed tackles, none, not 1. Keyshawn King has 9 forced missed tackles in 23 carries this year, is an example. So that goes to show you exactly how much Keyshawn King means to the running offense. Bryce Duke came in and had 1 forced missed tackle on six carries. Holston is who he is at this point. He's never been that type of running back. Black seems more like he's got a wide receiver build and he's playing running back. And remember, they were working him at wide receiver, and Keyshawn King some too, and then all the running backs got hurt. So here you go. Here's your top 2 backs, right? I wouldn't be surprised to see Black as a wide receiver at some point in the future. If not later this year, then certainly in the spring. I'm interested in seeing more of Bryce Duke. They only asked him to pass block once on Saturday, which probably shows that, like most young backs, he's behind there. I mean, there's a reason Malachi Thomas didn't really start getting carries until October last season, probably because it just took him a while to pick up pass blocking. Yep. But when you think about it, they've only asked Chance Black to pass block twice in 3 games. So they're not completely. Meanwhile, they've asked Holston to pass block 17 times. Yeah. They're more comfortable with him pass blocking than the other guys. So I think if you've got 2 backs that you're not comfortable with in terms of protection, you play the one that is most likely to net you positive things when they have the ball in their hands. And Black has had some nice runs this year, and I think his vision is pretty good, but and it's a small sample size, and again, it's Wofford's defense. But you got to wonder at some point if
Duke's going to surpass
if Duke's going to start getting more snaps there. And I don't just mean Black; I mean Holston too at some point. Because Holston is a 6-year senior.
I think it all kind of comes down to the health of Keyshawn King and Malachi Thomas.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I'm sure King will play on Thursday night.
Oh, yeah.
If he doesn't, then Hokies are in a lot of trouble. But it's assuming Malachi Thomas comes back at some point and he gets back healthy and gets back into football shape, and he and King are both healthy at the same time, then I think that affords you the opportunity, if you want to work in a third back.
It could be Bryce Duke.
It could be Bryce Duke, because you're not going to be leaning on him for a ton of carries, but you're going to get him in there enough to where you justify burning his red shirt.
And we talked about it last week that we really hoped Keyshawn King and Malachi Thomas would not see the field against Wofford, and you got your wish there. Kept them healthy. But I am upset. I love having you on here, David, but we're talking Bryce Duke, and we don't have Bryce Duke's fan club owner.
He'll be on here in the second half.
I'm sure he'll talk Bryce Duke in the second half. But Bryce Duke, again, he had a solid game, 6 carries, 25 yards, and then that touchdown catch. But you mentioned the offensive line struggles at times. The play that stands out is that first drive of the game, the fourth and one, where Wofford's defensive line kind of blew up the Tech offensive front.
I went back and watched the replay, and the guy who made the tackle came slicing in unblocked from the left. Silas Janzi and Jesse Hansen just went and blocked the same guy at the second level, and nobody blocked the one guy who came through. So, and I think it was Janzi's guy, because it was outside of Janzi. There's no way Hansen could have gotten that block. So, I don't get it. Janzi's an experienced player. I can understand, not being a fit for certain things. They're asking him to pull a lot on those pin and pull plays. And I don't know if he's the best fit for that. He's always been a better drive blocker, blocking a guy right in front of him, than he has pulling in the past. So I don't know if he's the greatest fit from a scheme standpoint. But on that particular play, as a 6th-year senior, I don't know. There's a lot of guys on this offensive line with playing experience that aren't playing as well as they have in the past, and that goes for tight ends as well. That could get fixed this week. That could get fixed in November. It might not get fixed at all this year. We just don't know at this point. So I think the Tech offense has a higher ceiling than we've shown so far, for sure. Are we going to reach that ceiling? I don't know. I do think at some point Tech will be healthier, for sure. Is that offensive line going to come around and run blocking? That's what I want to see.
Yeah, and I think makes it even more important that you have a running back that can force missed tackles, because if Keyshawn King isn't healthy, as Chris said, there was only one forced missed tackle last week on however many rushes, and that was true freshman Bryce Duke. So if you don't have Keyshawn King...
Yeah, Tech has had backs rush for 1,000 yards before without great blocking in front of them. That 2006 offensive line almost got Glennon killed, right? But Brandon Orr still rushed for 1,100 yards that year. He had this great jump cut, almost every single play the defensive tackle would get penetration, and Brandon Orr would just juke him in the backfield and then run through the vacated hole, right? So that's how, it's crazy.
So, yeah, with a guy like Keyshawn King or Malachi Thomas, if healthy, that could be a big weapon, but you just need him to be healthy.
They could have success despite the offensive line struggles, which right now it feels like Holston and Black are still going to struggle with that. We still have a few more things to mop up with Wofford, but first let's check in with Katie in the fourth chair for the first time.
Big development in the NIL world yesterday, as you can now purchase Virginia Tech players' jerseys on Fanatics. So
we know whose jersey Will Stewart's getting.
Well, that's funny because someone just commented in the chat, like, has Will solidified his man crush by purchasing a Bryce Duke jersey yet? So not sure the answer to that, but wanted to ask you guys a quick question regarding that. Which player on this current roster do you think is going to benefit the most from having their jersey sold? And which player in the past do you think would have benefited the most? And you can't say Michael Vick.
Oh, we can't say Michael Vick.
I think that would
right
be the
now.
easy
I feel
answer,
like I feel like right now it'd be like Dax. I feel like Dax Hollifield's probably.
Yeah, I don't feel like there's he's been here the longest for sure. And outside of Dax, I don't feel like there's a player on this team that Tech fans are as familiar with.
Yeah.
Now, if Keyshawn King goes out there and has a couple more 100-yard games, including Thursday night, then you might.
Or if Grant Wells plays well.
Yeah. Always your starting quarterback should be a popular option. But I would guess if they put if you counted him at the end of the season based on everything we know right now, I would guess probably Dax. All time besides Michael Vick.
Yeah.
It has to be Tyrod, right?
Probably. I would guess Tyrod.
I would guess Tyrod.
Either Tyrod, David Wilson, or Ryan Williams, probably one of those three. But I would think Tyrod being the quarterback,
especially winning 3 ACC championships. It's like
I still see Tyrod jerseys around. I still see students wearing 5 jerseys. Yeah. And they weren't even were barely alive when he was playing here. I think it would be Tyrod.
There's some good options.
I would probably guess Tyrod. Who would you think would be the top defensive player? That's what I'm curious about. Would it be Cam Chancellor?
I think Macho Harris.
I was about Macho Harris.
Yeah, you could actually just put Macho back there. It would be much cooler.
Yeah.
It's interesting that y'all say Dax for this current team, because I would agree, but it's also I'm curious if people would put stock in the fact that this is his last year as a Hokie though. So it's you wear it for one season and the season's already 4 games in, but
maybe you buy some early stock and get in on Malachi Thomas or something like that.
Maybe something like that. Maybe a Keyshawn King. If I was gonna buy a jersey and right now and a player's jersey. And I knew I was going to get a chance to wear it for, the next few years.
Bryce Duke.
Bryce Duke would be an option, yeah. But we can't have 2 people with the same jersey on the podcast. So there's some young guys I have in mind. CJ McCray, Keyshawn King.
Cole Nelson.
Could be here for at least another year. Cole's going to be a good player. I don't know if he'll be the dynamic pass rusher that CJ McCray.
Well, and he's in the 17, which it's a good look too. Cam's old number.
Yeah. Christian Moss would be another one that you could think about.
If if Will does buy a Bryce Duke jersey, he has to wear it on set.
No,
I believe.
Absolutely.
I'll say this: Tech lacks star power right now.
Yeah.
So we're having this conversation and we're trying to figure out whose jersey we'd buy. And it's not because there's a whole bunch of good players or great players that are well known, and we can't choose between them. It's because Tech has a bunch of solid guys, but they don't have anybody that is a proven star.
I feel like that.
Point.
Yeah, you would probably classify Taiwan Garbutt and Dorian Strong as
somebody needs to throw
really
Norrell Pollard
guys.
some love. He's the highest grading defender this season.
Pollard's
doesn't
good.
get any credit for it.
It's tough because defensive tackles usually don't get their jerseys bought, but he's wearing the 3, so.
Yeah, maybe he's got another year after this because of COVID.
Yeah,
maybe that's it. Maybe I'll throw him some love and get a Norrell Pollard jersey.
well, thanks for that, Katie. Yeah, we'll all have to buy one NIL jersey and just sit on set with it, and we'll see who has the most popular one. Let's go back to Wofford. Mentioned Grant Wells. He looks solid again, 314 yards, 2 touchdowns. But we also got our first look at Jason Brown, although it was limited. He only threw 3 passes, but some good accuracy for him on his limited attempts.
Yeah, and that's what you expect. He's a veteran guy who's played at the FCS FCS level. He's played at the SEC level. Just, I mean, he's. I think the offense suits him. So if something were to happen to Grant Wells, I would feel confident. I would certainly feel more confident than I did last year when Burmeister got hurt. So yeah, and it was good to get him a little time like that. You would have liked to have gotten him more, but at the same time, like, the Wofford game was important because you want your guys who are going to be playing the rest of the year to really be able to get their timing down, or try to get their timing down. So, and then maybe that was something I discounted a little bit too much before the game, because like Tech, still, they didn't play Braylon Moore, right? They still didn't play any backup offensive linemen. Even when it was a 20-point, they played Bob Schick because people got hurt.
Yeah, because Caden Moore went down.
Well, at one point in the first half, Caden Moore went down, so Schick came in at right guard. Then Janzi went down, so Schick came in at left tackle. So you have to assume that if he's the backup left tackle, he's also the backup right tackle, right? So I'm pretty sure Bob Schick is the backup at almost every single position except center. So this offensive line you could have 5 starters and Bob Schick written second string at 4 positions, and probably Jack Holyfield second string center. I think they're gonna try to redshirt Braylon Moore at this point. If you were gonna play him, did you push the button? Are you pushing the button? Good. If you were definitely gonna play him, you would have played him on the last drive against Wofford, wouldn't you? And the thing is, like, but you'd also don't want to waste a playing appearance in a meaningless fourth quarter last drive against Wofford.
Yeah.
What if somebody gets hurt and you need Braylon Moore the last 4 games of the season, and you had already played him against Wofford? That means when you play him those last 4 games, he goes over the redshirt limit at that point, right?
Yep.
So I think they're going to try and redshirt those guys, is what it seems like to me. I'm not saying he's never going to play, but I'm saying at this point, it's been 3 games, and they were up by 17 at the end of the Boston College game, and they didn't put him in. They were up by 20 at the end of the Wofford game, and they didn't put him in. Or the left tackle. Oh, goodness, what's his name? The true freshman.
Janzi? Oh.
No.
Oh, Chaplin.
They didn't put him in either.
Yeah.
Daquan Wright, who they're really high on. They haven't put him in, and they had opportunities to do that, and they didn't.
Yeah.
So I actually think they're going to try to redshirt as many of these guys as possible, which you know how I feel about that.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the biggest things is, like, there's still so many kinks to work out in this offense,
No doubt.
right? We've talked we spent so much time talking about, not just on this podcast, but previous ones, about how poor the run blocking has been. This is an offensive line where almost every single one is a veteran coming into this year, and the best graded offensive lineman, at least going into last week, was Jesse Hansen, the guy who had played the least amount of snaps.
Right.
So, like, what's going on up there? You've got 2 veteran tight ends who haven't played necessarily well in the run blocking game. Yes, Nick Gallo's caught a lot of passes, but, like, I just think across the board, that Wofford game could have been used 2 ways. It could have been, if you feel confident and comfortable with what your offense, or on both sides of the ball, but what your offense is currently doing, okay, then you can play the young guys.
Yes.
If you don't, it's an opportunity to, as long as nobody's going to get hurt, you work out the kinks and you try to nail down some of these things.
Yep.
And
you could see by their rotation on defense that they feel comfortable with defense. I mean, they had true freshman Kyrie Moyston in there at defensive end in like the first quarter.
Yeah.
They were very, very comfortable. Kelly Lawson played more snaps at Will linebacker than either McDonald or Jaden Keller, and that was his first defensive action on the season. Just they wanted to get him reps. So, yeah, they feel very comfortable about what they have on the defensive side of the ball, and they worked in more younger
guys. But clearly
guys
they don't offensively.
Offensively, absolutely. They worked in Jalen Jones some, obviously Christian Moss more.
And I think
guys they feel like that have high ceilings and could be better players by the end of the season. But as far as the backup offensive linemen, like those backup offensive linemen were pretty far behind the starters when the season began, and we've seen the starters perform at a subpar level. So so if you actually put a backup offensive lineman in the game, or multiple backup offensive linemen, what would it look like?
Yeah. So I think if you're Virginia Tech, you just have to knock on wood and hope that none of those guys get injured.
Bob Schick is going to be the MVP of the offensive line this year if Chaplin and Braylon Moore can redshirt. Bob Schick becomes an extremely important player just because his presence and his versatility may allow them to redshirt.
It's not quite like 2 or 3 years ago when it felt like Vance Weiss had 2 separate lines of offensive linemen that he could just throw one over the boards and they'd be fine out there.
Well, this is more normal.
Yes.
And no, don't get me, we have less depth than most teams, but most teams aren't anywhere near what Virginia Tech had on the offensive line the last couple of years, man. That was unique.
Well, let's talk defense a little bit. There's not much to talk about on the defensive side because they were good again. They have been all 3 games so far. But Chris touched on it with the near fumble near the goal line that led to the Wofford touchdown. David, up in the press box, did you think that was a fumble? Because in the stands, that replay, it looked like the ball was out.
I thought it was, but honestly, there was, a couple minutes left, and I wasn't going to complain about getting out of there early. I just wanted the replay to be over. But, yeah, I thought it was a fumble. And I think again, Chris Marv was calling those plays, and I think that's good experience to get him calling defensive plays, even if he does give up a touchdown, because it's a game that's already put away. But
I don't think I've ever seen a head coach put in the backup defensive coordinator in the middle of a game.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because Brent Pry was asked about it yesterday, and he was like, yeah, Chris Marv called some of the last couple series. It was a good experience for him, and but of course, everything was kind of all over the place because it was, new personnel, like young guys, and then of course people are like, oh my God, does that mean Chris Marv gave up the touchdown? It's like, okay, all right.
Well, when you look at the replay review, I think we're willing to trade that loss for the non-targeting call on Shamari Connor.
Yes, I did not. I was freaking out when that happened. I was like, "Oh my God!"
That's the worst possible thing that could have happened. At that point.
That looked like targeting.
What got him is like he didn't hit him exactly on the top of the head. It was more like right there between the side of the head and the crown of the head. It wasn't directly crown.
I remember watching the replay, and I said, that's about as textbook targeting as you can possibly get. So I think Tech might have caught a break there.
I think they seem to be a little more lenient this year, is what a lot of the TV announcers are saying. Because I was watching a Notre Dame game over the weekend, and God, who were they playing? They're playing Cal, and the Cal guy got ejected, but it was directly on the top of the head, directly on the crown, and the announcers were saying that.
That mattered.
That's a big deal. Like if it's not directly on the crown, they're less likely to call it this year.
Well, big for the Hokies because Shamari Connor would have not been able to play for the first half against West Virginia.
Yeah. That would have been not good.
Not good at all. Before we turn the page from Wofford, let's get some special teams love in there. Will tweeted about Will Ross, who apparently had never played football up until the ODU game.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah,
he was at the U.S. Soccer Development Academy.
Yes, So I tweeted that, and somebody was like, "I've never heard of the U.S. Soccer Development Academy." Of course they haven't. And it's like they're like, "Did you mean a club academy?" No, I meant the U.S. Soccer Developmental Academy.
Yes, literally what I typed.
Yeah, he's had an interesting journey. He's a guy that probably would have gone out of high school. His original plan was to go overseas and play soccer, which, if you're playing for the U.S. Soccer Developmental Academy, I cannot blame you. And then he ended up walking on to Coastal Carolina, and then he ended up transferring to South Carolina and didn't play, and he wasn't really, I guess he was on the roster, but he didn't do anything. And then he transfers to Virginia Tech, walks on under Justin Fuente, and now all of a sudden he's the kicker, and he's never kicked because he didn't kick in high school, which if Brent Pry is like, oh yeah, good on Stu Holt for not telling me. I feel like I want to know, if my kicker had never kicked in a game before.
Yeah, well, either way, even the backup kicker is a true freshman, so he's never kicked in a college game before.
Yeah.
But I think I don't think people truly appreciate that. Football is a sport; it's a bunch of big dudes moving at a very fast speed.
Yeah,
and
I guess the fact that Will Ross can kind of step in and he's 5 for 5 already.
Yeah, that's impressive concentration on his part, because it's just not something you're used to. It's just having a lot of people that big flying around you that fast.
And and I think a lot of, I think it's fair to say that a lot of these guys on this team, and just in college football in general, have probably played since they were anywhere between 5 and 10 years old. And then you've got this guy who has never played a football game, not college, but a football game in his life, and just waltzes into the stadium, and then I was 5 for 5 on
not
field
chip
goals.
shots either. I want to say 4 have been from 40 plus
on
yards.
40.
So that makes you think he probably would have been what, 6 for 6 had that snap at Old Dominion not gone over Peter Moore's hands.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe we have a third string kicker too from the cadets. Finally,
about that?
somebody made the
Oh
kick
my
for
goodness,
cash
that
on
was
the
amazing.
field. That was really cool too. I want to say he won $1,000 for that. No hesitation too. Just
First
went
time
up,
ever.
knocked it right
I wonder if
through.
he did that in high school.
I bet he did
Like a good possibility.
because he looked pretty confident
When he
stepping
was
into that
doing
one.
it in his like complete uniform.
Well, it was impressive in those shoes.
yeah.
Yeah.
That he was able to do it.
Yeah. So good special teams from Will Ross,
Peter Moore.
and the fans, and Peter Moore. Peter Moore maybe got more chances than he wanted to against Wofford, but he did a good job with it.
Yeah. Like I wrote in my Sunday article that I enjoy watching him punt. I just wish I didn't have to watch it so often.
Yeah.
It's like a punter is like a nuclear bomb. It's like a really powerful weapon that you hope you don't have to use, right?
Well, he maybe used more often than they wanted to, but again, Peter Moore continuing his maybe Ray Guy Award campaign early on.
And let's give DJ Harvey some credit. He's showing more bravery and confidence and coming up and catching those short punts.
Yep.
And it's not costing Tech a bunch of field position like it did against ODU.
Yeah. It's also of note. Cole Beck might start. He might return some kickoffs this
Yeah,
weekend.
if they kick it to him.
Yeah, he's yesterday when Monday's depth chart was released. Chance Black, they basically took Keyshawn King out of the kickoff return game just because he's so
Probably
valuable
smart.
and you don't want to get him hurt or anything. So now it's Chance Black and Cole Beck as the top 2 kickoff returns. So maybe you'll see Cole Beck return in a kickoff. That'd be interesting.
Could see some electric returns from the Blacksburg native on Thursday night, and we are going to turn the page to West Virginia after the break here. We're going to switch around. Katie's going to take over in the host chair. I'm going to the 4th chair. David's going off. Will's coming in. We've got a line change coming, but we will talk West Virginia, the battle for the Black Diamond Trophy, coming up on Thursday night. That preview coming up on the second half of episode 256 of the Tech Sideline podcast. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
We welcome you back into episode 256 of the Tech Sideline podcast, brought to you by First Bank and Trust. Jake Lyman led our Wofford recap discussion in the first half. Katie Adams joining you now as we look ahead and preview West Virginia. Reminder, if you are watching in the YouTube chat, continue to drop any questions you have for Will and Chris in the chat, and we'll get to those with Jake at the end of the show. Well, as the season progresses, the matchups get more and more exciting, and I cannot think of a better way to end this September slate than West Virginia, Thursday night in Lane Stadium. Feels good to have the Mountaineers coming to town for the first time in 18 years.
Yeah, I was a senior in college the last time West Virginia was here, and it was great. The reason beating them in 2004 and 2005 felt so good is because Tech had lost to them in 2002 and 2003. That's what a rivalry is all about. And I'll never forget rushing the field after that 2004 game and running down to the south end zone, of course, to taunt all the West Virginia fans. And I've just never seen such a wall of middle fingers directed in my direction and water bottles thrown at me and everything. And I just stood there and embraced it. It was fantastic. It's what college football is all about.
So a couple things. West Virginia was ranked number 6 in the country that day. And it's funny you mentioned the middle fingers. While I was waiting to do my session, I was making up the thumbnail that's eventually going to wind up on the homepage and on the YouTube
I know what
archive of this. And there were no middle fingers, but I got a really Russian Hokie, Ivan Morozov, took a really cool picture up in Morgantown where it's an isolation shot of Chamari Connor. And he's kind of just, it's hard to describe the look on his face. It's kind of like this. And there's a wall of WVU fans behind him just yelling and screaming. So it's this cool juxtaposition of the white and maroon, and of course the yellow and blue.
We've got a great picture also taken by Yvonne from the 2005 West Virginia game. And
actually, that was me. I took that.
You
picture.
took that one on the sideline.
Yep.
All right, so there's a player, and we won't say who, but he's flipping the crowd the bird behind the West Virginia bench, and like Vince Hall's right next to him, and they're all just laughing at the West Virginia fans and everything. I mean, I have missed this so much.
So that was I was in the WVU press corps a couple of times. WVU let me in the press box in 2001 and 2005, well before Virginia Tech ever let Tech Sideline in the press box.
Of course.
Now, they didn't give us press box access in 2003 because there was just so much demand, because Tech was a top 5 football
Number 3,
team.
yeah. I think, yeah.
Now, we did have Russian Hokie on the field in 2003 shooting photos. They did allow that. And someone, I'll never forget this, somebody took a picture from the stands of Yvonne standing in the end zone. And remember, the 2003 game was the brutal one, you know. And by the way, so a couple things. Yvonne took a picture of a police officer holding a bottle. It's fortunate I'm drinking a Diet Mountain Dew. Holding a soda bottle this size, filled with sand.
And probably batteries too.
And the officer's just holding it and looking up into the stands.
Projectiles.
And there's another picture that somebody took from the stands where Yvonne's all by himself, and the field is in front of him, but he's standing in the end zone, and he's just looking over his shoulder at the crowd.
Now, remember, Yvonne's Russian. He's experienced a lot.
He's been through some stuff.
He's been in the Red Army, all that stuff. And still, the stuff that was going on in the crowd behind him in Morgantown was surprising.
So the WVU's policy, and this used to be a common policy, old school media policy, is you'd be in the press box working the game, but they would let you, at the beginning of the fourth quarter, or at some point in the fourth quarter, they would march you down to the field, because at WVU, the media interviews were in Milan Puskar, I think is the name of their stadium. They have a media room down, kind of in their version of the south end zone. So you walk down to the field at some point in the fourth quarter, and you actually spend a good portion of the fourth quarter on the field. And it was the same last year. And so David says they still do it that way. And so I was down there with a digital camera in 2005, and I'm the one who got the picture of this particular Virginia Tech football player. And you know, by then the game was decided.
If there's a picture of one of our players doing that to West Virginia fans after a win on Thursday night, I'll buy that player's jersey for NIL.
That is correct. That'll be an NIL poster for that player.
Oh, that would be great.
The dark side of NIL. Virginia Tech would be horrified if we sold like 1,000 posters. And some athlete made money off that.
Will, what's your take on how the players feel about this rivalry? Because none of them are really old enough to know what it was like at the peak. Do you think the close loss in Morgantown last year is enough to get them fired up to play?
I think that their level of being fired up will be no more than any other. These are athletes getting ready to play a quality opponent in front of a big crowd. Maybe our players haven't talked about this, but maybe they experienced some stuff last year that adds a little bit of juice to it. And having third and goal at the 2, and not finishing is got to be a regret of the guys that were there. But
Dax talked about that.
Did he? Yeah. But these guys, I was actually thinking about this this morning. There were so many good games in this rivalry that most of our football players, they were either little kids or they weren't even born. Of course, the 95 game was a big one for Tech. 99 game stands out.
Oh man, dude, you can go back to the 80s.
Yeah,
when West Virginia went unbeaten in 88, and then Tech went up to Morgantown and beat them in 89.
Yeah,
the 93 game, which Tech lost by 1, West Virginia went unbeaten that year. Right?
Yes.
And Tech missed a field goal that would have won. The 2005 game, West Virginia went 11 in Virginia Tech. So both these fan bases, and this is why it's such a great rivalry, and I'm sad that it may never get played again. Both fan bases, both programs have been at the very pinnacle of college football, undefeated, playing in huge bowl games, but didn't quite win a national championship.
Right.
Both stadium sizes are similar. I know their fans are rowdy, but or some of them are, but they deeply care about football, just like Virginia Tech fans. And like this is the type of rivalry that college football is built on.
Yep. And The one difference between the two schools is that the entire state of West Virginia buys into WVU. It's I don't really have the words to describe the culture of not just college athletics in the state of West Virginia, but high school athletics. Athletics is very important in West Virginia. And I know it is in Virginia, but there's, again, I can't describe what it is that's different. And yes, Virginia is a much larger state. How many people live in West Virginia? A million people?
Probably 5.
It's
if that. 3 maybe.
In Virginia, it's something like 7 or 8 million people. So the population's much larger.
So it's probably only like 1.7.
Okay, Nick says 1.7 million in the state of West Virginia.
Oh shoot, I was thinking about electoral votes. I think 5 electoral votes.
5 electoral votes.
Yeah.
But the entirety of the state of Virginia does not really buy into Virginia Tech football or UVA sports or anything like that. So that part of it is different. But other than that, there is a lot of similarities.
Right.
Well, let's go ahead and get into this matchup. West Virginia has a lot of playmakers on offense, and we'll touch on a lot of them, but it starts with their quarterback in JT Daniels, a transfer from Georgia, originally started at USC. So this kid has a lot of experience playing at a high level, and that should work to his advantage in Lane Stadium.
Yeah, he's been a starter now at his 3rd different school. He's never been able to hold on to a starting job long term, but he's faced a lot of quality competition. And for his career, 38 touchdowns, 18 interceptions. He's got a good arm, completes well over 60% of his passes. He's made them a better offense from last year. I think they're more capable of stretching the field. He was a great pickup for him in the transfer portal. I think if their defense was better, then I think Neil Brown would have a legit chance to save his job. But right now it doesn't quite look like it is. But if you were a neutral and you didn't care about West Virginia football either way, you would enjoy watching a West Virginia football game because they go out there and they make plays, man.
Yeah, they're always a good physical team. They look like an athletic team to me, and they're fun to watch. I enjoyed watching their game against Pitt. Mm-hmm. Daniels, did you say 38 touchdowns and 18 interceptions?
I believe that's right.
That's not a great ratio.
Right.
This year it's 6 and 2, so it's a little bit better. 6 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. It's interesting to compare him and Grant Wells. Daniels, 64.1% of his passes. Wells, 65.6. Daniels, 753 yards. Wells, 651. Now, where the touchdown interception ratio is different. Daniels is 6-2, and Wells has brought himself up to 4 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. So when you look at it that way, and I'm sorry, I don't have the Russian stats in front of me, but I was surprised when you ran the numbers that Daniels has a career.
It's like minus 250 to 300 yards. He averages like minus 3 yards a carry for his career.
Right. So historically, he's not a running quarterback.
Yeah. The ODU quarterback had his 2nd career positive yardage game against Virginia Tech when he rushed for 7 yards, which is 7 times his previous career high.
And I remember Jurkovic can't run for squat, but he ran not this year against Virginia Tech, but he did last year. He had like a couple of key runs last year. So you never know what a quarterback's going to do, but it's interesting to look at the 2 QBs and see how similar they are statistically.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned the lack of mobility with Daniels because Virginia Tech has certainly struggled with mobile quarterbacks in the past, and thankfully they don't really have to scheme for that with Daniels this week because that's just not his strong suit. Getting into some of the weapons around JT Daniels, though, we'll start with the run game. West Virginia looks like they found a diamond in the rough in CJ Donaldson, who's been a big contributor this year given his lack of recruitment.
6'2", 240 pounds. He was a tight end. All right, so 247 ranked him the number 111 player in Florida last year and the number 46 tight end in the country. So he enrolls at West Virginia, I think in the spring. And at one point they had some running backs dinged up and they needed a body at running backs. They were like, he's 6'2", 240. Let's just put him there for a week because we need somebody. Well, here he is now, 28 carries, averaging 9.4 yards per carry and 6 touchdowns 3 games into his career.
That's terrifying.
And he's just running over dudes. He's a monster. Sometimes he doesn't play very hard when the ball's not in his hands, which I think is typical of younger players. He didn't do as well against Kansas, had a big game against Pitt, and obviously had a big game against Towson last week, which, they couldn't put up much of a fight. Pitt didn't know what they were getting themselves into. I mean, there was no film on him. He's just some dude. He wasn't even listed second on their depth chart. He was actually listed third with like an or between him and the second guy. So he wasn't even a guy you'd really be expecting to play. Like if I would have gone into that game as a Pitt coach, I'd be like, maybe he'll touch the ball 2 or 3 times, but that's it. And certainly you don't expect him to go out there and play like he did. The good news for Virginia Tech is, he's a really physical, big player, but Virginia Tech has 3 games of film on him. They're not going to be surprised. They know what he's capable of doing. They know they're going to have to gang tackle. They know they're going to have to get penetration to make sure he doesn't get running downhill against smaller defensive backs. So they won't be taken by surprise like Pittsburgh was. But, yeah, I think he's a guy that's got a lot of ability, and it honestly goes to show you how much of a crapshoot and luck is involved in recruiting a lot of times these days. I mean, this guy was a 3-star tight end, middle of the pack. I think his only other visits that he took were like South Florida and some other smaller school. Yeah. And so, and the guy looks like he's going to be a 1,000-yard rusher at some point for West Virginia. I mean, is that luck or is that good recruiting? I mean, maybe some of both.
So it's I make up these roster cards, so this is my window into things, and he averages more per carry than Nick Gallo averages per reception. He's got 9.4 yards a carry. Gallo's got 7.8, and that's not denigrating Gallo. It's just interesting whenever you got a runner who averages more per carry than Virginia Tech's leading receiver. Nick Gallo has the most catches of anybody on the team. Mm-hmm. And so the other thing, when you talk about Donaldson's size, again, 6'2", 240. Dax Hollifield is 6'1", 245. So what's going to happen here? Dax has been playing much more downhill, making much more physical contact. They typically run Donaldson up the middle, the highlights you watched, right?
Yeah, and he's got good vision, so he made a few cuts to the outside too. I mean, this is a good athlete. He looks like a good player, but he's not going to average 9.4 yards per carry against Virginia Tech. Of course not.
So that's going to be an interesting matchup to see, is Dax against Donaldson.
Dax against Donaldson, but the main thing, though, is defensive lineman getting penetration to interrupt his straight-ahead style. Like, don't let him get up to speed and running downhill once he gets to the linebacker level and the secondary level. Yeah. That's when he's a load to handle.
Yeah, he's not a guy that's going to take the handoff and hit the hole really quick. You don't want to. I don't think so.
Well, I don't. It's a small sample size. Yeah, like 28 carries for his career. Yeah, looks like he's got good vision to me. It depends on the style of running play. West Virginia's offensive line has not been great this year, but they have opened some holes for him, and he's exploited those holes by running over linebackers and defensive backs once he gets through those holes. So that's what's going to be key for Tech. Like, they have to stop him at the line of scrimmage, because once he gets 5-10 yards past the line of scrimmage, that's when he's really hard to handle.
Yeah.
How worried are you that this game will be a little bit of deja vu from the game last year, in the sense that the West Virginia run game won them the game? Letty Brown rips off an 80-yard run at the beginning of the game, and our lack of offensive talent lost us the game.
Yeah, I hear you, and I think West Virginia is – I think they're probably more explosive in the passing game this year than they were last year. In fact, I would put money that they are. I think Tech's defense is a better defense than the one that went up there last year. Like, I don't think they'll break off an 80-yard run on the first drive of the game, but who really knows? That game looked like it was going to be a blowout early in favor of West Virginia. Yeah. Like, they scored the first.
It went up 14-0.
Yeah, and it's like, oh,
real
my
quick.
God. Yeah, and then Tech came back and, obviously could have won the game at the end. So you're just thinking, so like Tech didn't start well, and then they didn't finish the last 2 plays. I think it's I think the Tech defense will match them for the most part, but I think also I think they'll kind of cancel each other out. I think the Tech defense has been dominant against a bunch of bad offenses, and I think the West Virginia defense hasn't been so great, but they've faced some good offenses too. So I think they'll kind of maybe cancel each other out.
My gut feeling is that it's going to take 30 points to win this one for Virginia Tech.
Yeah.
Jake, I don't know if you can scroll through the chat comments, but I did see something from Scott Glessner about how many points WVU has scored in the fourth quarters of recent games, and last year is an example of that. WVU did not have a great second half offensively. So, I would say WVU's faced a better quality competition, particularly when they played Pitt. And we don't know how good Kansas is.
Well, Kansas is 3-0, and they just smoked Houston on the road now.
Right.
So Kansas. This goes to show you off topic how much coaching matters. Like Lance Leipold goes to Kansas from Buffalo, and all of a sudden Kansas is 3-0 and winning road games against West Virginia and Houston. And his old school Buffalo, after being so good when he was there, is losing on Hail Marys to Holly Cross, an FCS team.
Yeah. So WVU has faced better teams, and from that standpoint, it's probably more prepared. So there may be an adjustment period, kind of like what you saw in Morgantown last year when they scored 14 quick ones and Tech adjusted and played better for the rest of the game. So that's another thing to watch is how are these two teams coming out of the gate. And I say this all the time, we get Virginia Tech gets really excited about Enter Sandman, and they get really pumped up. Well, so does the other team. They love that stuff. When they come in here and they see the atmosphere that they get just as fired up as Virginia Tech's players. So it'd be interesting to watch those two things.
West Virginia's run game will certainly be hard to keep up with. I would almost argue that their pass game is a little more lethal. A guy in Bryce Ford Wheaton who's averaging 12.3 yards per catch.
He's a big guy too. What is he? 6'3", 224?
6'3", 224, yeah.
Yeah, so he's going to be a different type of receiver that Virginia Tech has faced this year. I don't know that, he's a hugely explosive guy, but he's a darn productive player. I mean, I think he didn't play as much this past week against Towson because they didn't need him. But in the first two games, he caught 20 passes combined against two FBS teams or two Power 5 teams and scored 4 touchdowns in those two games. So this guy, along with former West Virginia receiver Ollie Jennings III, who's at ODU now, is going to be the two best receivers Virginia Tech has faced right now. Yeah. So far this year. Honestly, Zay Flowers was darn good too. You just can't tell it because their O-line is so horrible.
So let's add a clarifying statement here. West Virginia's O-line's not great, but they're not as bad as Boston College.
Nothing's as bad as Boston College's
That may literally be the worst offensive line in the country.
Well, like you just said, I was going to mention the offensive line. Next, we'll certainly see a familiar face in Doug Nestor. Their offense in general has a lot of star power, but is it a fair assumption that the offensive line will struggle the most on that side of the ball?
Maybe. I think Nestor's listed like number 1 at one position and number 2 at another position. And the first game he started at right tackle, and then the next game he started at right guard. And then this past week's game he started at right guard, but he also played 11 snaps at center. So he's played 3 different positions in 3 games. So I do think they have some depth issues up there and some continuity issues, which is a little bit surprising because they do have some experienced guys up there. And again, their fans are probably saying the same thing that Virginia Tech fans are saying. Like, we've got some veteran guys up front. They probably could be playing better than they are. When is that going to happen? Is it going to happen this Thursday, or is it going to be later in the season?
So, of course, Doug Nestor's name jumps off the page at you if you're a Hokie fan. But another one, if you follow recruiting, Wyatt Milam has cracked the starting lineup.
They were high school teammates.
Yeah, and Milam is a guy that we thought was coming here.
Some people did. Did you really? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, Katie was connected to recruiting at the time.
I was in recruiting at the time, so I remember making lots of cards for him.
Lots of cards. 200 birthday cards.
Yep, we're going to get
Nestor's, I think, is better fit for guard, for sure.
He's 6'7", which I think is why people want to, and he's listed at he's still listed at tackle in their depth chart.
Yeah, but he started at guard. He hadn't played a snap at tackle the last 2 games. Yeah. We'll see what happens this week.
So don't rail on me for my roster card. I'm just following WVU's depth chart.
Yeah, I know. It's but as we know that it can be confusing. And when you have confusion, like what your depth chart looks like on the offensive line, but then when you drill down into the snaps and see these guys are playing multiple positions all over the place over multiple games, you know that they've got some issues. So hopefully those are some issues that Virginia Tech can take advantage
capitalize
of.
on. Yep.
So here's an interesting question. How much of an advantage factor do you think Virginia Tech has over West Virginia in the sense that they don't have to travel this week? So West Virginia has a very short week. I guess practice Monday, Tuesday. They come up here tomorrow, sit in the hotel all day Thursday night, and then you got to go play a game.
Yeah, I would say generally those short week games would favor the home team because of that travel day. Obviously, both teams, I suspect, or at least both coaching staffs, spent quite a lot of time last week thinking about not Wofford, not Towson, but West Virginia and Virginia Tech. So we'll see. It does favor it, I think, but I think there's so many you could think of so many different reasons to pick both teams in this game. Yeah. I think, and that's one of the reasons you could pick Virginia Tech, I think.
So David, when you posted the article, let me check and see if you see what your pick was. Scroll.
Yeah.
All right. So David went with you went with Virginia Tech, David?
He did.
All right. So I went with VT.
Will Ross kicks a game.
All right. So David says Will Ross is going to kick a game-winning field goal. No pressure. All right. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead there.
No, you're totally fine.
I was just curious.
Yeah, we'll get to game picks at the end of the show. We already know David picked the Hokies. So like we said, advantage for Virginia Tech that they don't have to travel this week. I would argue an advantage for West Virginia is that game one, they've already gone on the road in a hostile environment in a rivalry game, and they lost. And so I feel like they're kind of playing with some intensity in the fact that they've already, gone on the road. They felt what it's like to lose in that rivalry game, and now they have another chance to redeem themselves again in a hostile environment.
I would agree with
that's
that.
Fair.
Yeah, I mean, it's not easy to come into Lane, but I'm not saying not Heinz Field anymore. Whatever.
Acrisure Stadium.
Yeah, I'm still going to call it Heinz Field. Yeah. It's clearly nowhere close to Lane, but that was a really good crowd that night.
And it was a Pitt heavy crowd.
Right.
They didn't sell out just because WVU was there. There were a lot of Pitt fans.
Yeah, that's one that Pitt fans actually showed up for. Yeah. Again, a good rivalry game that barely gets played anymore. What a shame. No more Oklahoma State now.
Yeah.
By the way, that rivalry's going away. What a shame. Anyway, so yeah, that's a great point. That they're not going to be intimidated or anything like that. And a lot of teams, no, it's a good crowd. It's a good atmosphere at West Virginia games, but it's not quite Thursday night Enter Sandman Virginia Tech level. They're going to be fired up to play in that environment.
That's what I'm saying, man. Yeah, if you're expecting them to come out and not hit the ground running, so to speak, I think you're going to be a little surprised. I think they'll be ready.
Tech is going to have to beat them. Like, they're not going to come in and say, "Oh my gosh, well, I've never seen anything
start chucking
like this
interceptions
before."
and things like
exactly.
That Pitt game definitely prepped them for a game like this. More to get to ahead of the game on Thursday, but let's go ahead and send it over to Jake in the fourth chair.
I've got a few things for you guys. We talked at the break. Will actually found that senior analyst Brian Christ with the Hokies is going to have a little family reunion on Thursday night. His son Jackson is a walk-on quarterback for West Virginia. So obviously I don't think Jackson's going to see the field, but it'll be cool to see a little family rivalry facing off on Thursday. Something that happened while we were in the first half of the podcast, the ACC announced that it is moving its offices from Greensboro to Charlotte in 2023. Maybe a move we kind of expected.
Yeah.
I love this move by Jim Phillips. It should have always been in Charlotte.
Yeah, no doubt.
All right, last one for you here. This is the one that I think is going to get Will and Chris going a little bit. So Nick Brown, who is assisting with our production today, actually brought home a West Virginia fan guide that they hand out at the stadiums. And I just randomly flipped to a page and found the high five rules that West Virginia fans have to abide by while they're at games. So let's read off 3 of these for you. No excessive drinking. Intoxicated fans are not allowed inside or outside the stadium. I don't think I've ever seen a West Virginia fan drink. So
alrighty.
No foul or abusive language. We're good there.
Well, damn it, that's no good.
And no throwing anything onto the field. So, Chris and Will, have you ever seen a West Virginia fan break the high five rules?
Have I seen it?
Have I ever not seen a West Virginia fan break the high five rules? Yeah, that's interesting. Wonder how much those are enforced. No, in all seriousness.
So again, I was on the field in 01 and 05, and Tech pummeled them both times. So I wasn't there in 03.
Right.
That's when those rules got broken big time.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there was and I'm not condoning any of their actions, of course, but I don't understand the whole let's assault people and throw things at people. I don't get that.
That whole narrative is no good.
But I do understand the emotions of it. And that, like, they thought their football program was done, and it was our fault. And not only was it our fault, we lied to them and said we wouldn't accept an invitation to the ACC even if we got one. And well, then guess what? We got one, and we accepted it. Right?
That girl said, "Yeah, I will date you after all." And we said, "See you, honey."
Put yours. I mean, we just spent a whole summer talking about conference realignment.
Yeah.
And imagine how you would feel if like the SEC and Big Ten expanded and you know the SEC decided they wanted the North Carolina market and the Carolina basketball brand, and they invited Carolina, and then the Big Ten invited UVA because of AAU membership over Virginia Tech. Imagine how you would feel about those two schools, especially if they came out and made public statements. We're not leaving the ACC. We'd never accept an invitation.
Until we
and
are.
then they do.
Yeah.
Imagine how you would feel if that happened. And imagine how you would feel the next time we played those schools in football. So I understand the emotions of it back then. And I think those emotions have died down to a certain extent now. Like, I don't think there were any major issues in the last game. Up there.
I could go on a rant about my experience in Morgantown last year. It was terrible.
Last year.
Won't be returning. Yeah, I don't know if any of y'all went to that game, but it was not good.
Okay.
Well,
They're
I do have to say the high five rules, I looked it up. They were introduced in 2011. So prior to 2011, all of that A-okay.
Right. Yeah, sure. Endorsed even. I always said when I retire, I would open a used furniture store in Morgantown. It's just some nice spending money.
Jeff Holland in the YouTube chat has said that the high five rules does assume that West Virginia fans can read. So wait.
Hey, Jeff has played in that rivalry. Jeff played in some of those games we talked about earlier. He was there in the 93 game. He was up there when Virginia Tech shut him out and was part of that defensive line in 1995. I bet Jeff kept his helmet on the sideline the entire game. I'm sure he knows what it feels like to have a battery ding off the side of a football helmet.
Yeah, I think players of that era will tell you one of the things the coaches told them is keep their helmets on at all times.
No question. I think in 97 they tried to turn over the team bus when Tech arrived at the stadium.
Well, I think they did that to Miami in 96.
Okay.
That was the game where I think Miami blocked a punt at the end of the game
it was
to
a really
win.
good game, yeah.
Great game, you know. And man, the Big East had some awesome rivalries.
I know.
Just great football conference, just poorly run at the top.
Well, that was fun, Jake. Thank you. We'll jump back into this rivalry, specifically on the defensive side of the ball. As highly as we've talked about the West Virginia offense, you can't necessarily say the same about their defense, especially their linebacker group, which has had a lot of issues, Chris, as you know.
Yeah, they generally seem to go in the opposite direction of what they're supposed to be going in. They've struggled in coverage. Out of the three of their linebackers that play a lot, so each of them have played 2 games, so that's 6 total games. They've gotten 1 good coverage grade out of those games. So just not a very good performance from that group so far this season. This would be a game where I would feel really good about Tech's old smoke and mirrors offense that was always getting so good at getting linebackers out of position and confusing them and things like that. So you'd like to see something dialed up this week. Something with motion, something that can throw off the opposition's reads, go against the tendencies that you've established the first 3 games on a certain percentage of plays, because that group of linebackers has not been disciplined this year. And in the secondary, they've lost their best corner for a good chunk of the season due to an injury. This is a really good cover corner. And as a result, they just don't have any standout coverage guys in their back end at all. So this is a chance to put up some yards in the passing game for sure.
Well, you gotta control the line of scrimmage and in the running game get through the line of scrimmage. I really think that's key to the game. I talked about that a little bit in my part of the preview, that it could come down to, and we'll get into the D line here in a second. Dante Stills, you wrote, is their really most talented player. If they can neutralize him, not allow penetration, give Grant Wells time to pass, and we hope Keyshawn King plays, get the running backs through the line of scrimmage, I like Tech's chances. If they can't control the line of scrimmage, I think they're in big trouble.
Yeah, you alluded to it. West Virginia playing without Charles Woodson, who was injured in game one, was really a key piece to that cornerback room. So I know that they're going to struggle there, and hopefully Virginia Tech has the advantage in pass coverage. Good week for the wide receivers to get healthy and make some progress. And Will, like you said, I mean, if there's one key piece to the West Virginia defense in general, and specifically that defensive line, it's going to be Dante Stills, who's going to pose a really big challenge for our inexperienced offense.
Yes,
an endless line of Stills people playing for WVU.
Gary Stills was a really good linebacker, I believe, for them in the 1990s. I remember when he played there, and you know, Dante, you know, grew up in West Virginia with his dad, of course, and Virginia Tech was one of his final group of schools, and he took a few visits to Tech. And I went back and found an old article that he did for Tech Sideline with Jason Stame from when he was being recruited back in 2017, I guess.
He loved Virginia Tech.
He really liked it. The Tech coaches recruited him as hard, but he said the Tech coaches were going to his basketball games to show him how much they wanted him, right? The problem is he was really never going anywhere besides West Virginia because that's where his dad went to school and he grew up in West Virginia. If you grow up in the state of West Virginia, unless your parents went to Marshall, you're a West Virginia fan. That's just the way that state is. And especially when your dad's a West Virginia football alum and a really good player for West Virginia, I almost felt like that effort by the Tech staff would have been better spent elsewhere, but they did a really good job recruiting him.
But I think in the modern era, you still have to put in that effort because you never know with the transfer portal and NIL and that stuff and players moving so much.
That's true.
Go ahead and spend the time to establish that relationship because it might pay off.
Okay.
Now, West Virginia is a different case, but in other cases, definitely work those relationships, even if you don't think you're getting a kid, because it could pay off later.
Yeah.
It obviously didn't work out in the end, but when you said that, it just reminds me of Doug Nestor's recruitment because he was originally committed to Ohio State for a long time. And when he decommitted, you know, the Virginia Tech coaches still kept up that relationship with him and allowed him to commit to Virginia
Isn't
Tech.
that the one where Fuente spent like 6 hours
His
talking to him?
in-home visit with Doug Nestor went so well that it lasted 6 hours.
Yeah.
They got along so well. And that's why it was really sad to me when Nestor transferred.
Yeah.
Because the relationship started out with Virginia Tech, and Fuente started out on such a strong footing.
Yeah.
We talked about Dante Stills obviously has ties to this game with his dad playing at West Virginia. It's also a big one for Grant Wells as a West Virginia native and, you know, played the first half of his college career at Marshall. So I'm sure he's got a lot of family coming in for this one.
I talked to Grant Wells at Media Day. His dad went to Virginia Tech, so he grew up a Virginia Tech fan. But as I just talked about, if you're a kid growing up in West Virginia, you're a West Virginia fan too. That's just what everybody does in that state. So he's one of those rare people who grew up both a Virginia Tech fan and a West Virginia fan. There's a few people like that.
Is he the one whose dad was a walk-on?
I believe so.
And then got injured, and that was the end of his career?
I think that's right. Grant Wells, you know, his first game in Lane Stadium was Beamer's last game. So, you know,
as a fan,
he goes back with both programs. So we wonder, like, how many players on either team understand the rivalry. Well, if there's any one player on either team that understands the rivalry, it's Grant Wells for sure.
Yep.
Something that may be of concern. We talked in the preseason about how depth being an issue, and there's obviously been injuries here and there showing itself already this season. How much does your confidence scale range in this one if you knew that we had everyone 100%?
That's a good question. And I actually made my game pick based on that. And then I made my game pick based on faith because I see the Virginia Tech offense evolving. We saw Jaden Blue make a couple of really nice catches. Mm-hmm. We saw Christian Moss lay out and make a catch. You're starting, and that was one of my bigger concerns at the beginning of the year was who's going to make plays in the wide receiver corps.
Sure.
You know, you can count on Caleb Smith, and he can make plays in tight coverage, but as far as those crazy athletic plays, so you see that part of things developing. You see Grant Wells getting more comfortable in the offense. So, you know, to answer the question, if the offense in particular evolves fast enough and everybody's healthy, then I'm still probably only about 50-50, you know, so that's where I am.
I'd feel a lot better. If I knew, I mean, I think Jaden Blue was approaching 100%, if not already.
Well, he has slid up to first on the depth chart.
Right. And I know Keshawn King will play. I'd be shocked if he didn't at least.
Yeah.
Is he 100%? I mean, who really knows? How close to Caleb Smith to being 100%? I don't think very, because he came up lame again in the game on Saturday, and it's a shorter week now, right?
Yeah.
Somebody I know who was at the ODU game said he watched Smith walk off to the locker room, kind of clutching his side, like his abdomen area.
Yeah, he walked right in front of the end zone, and he was holding.
Well,
down
that's what he was favoring when he came up the other day. So that's a tough injury that can, in a contact sport, that can be difficult to get over. But like, if I knew Caleb Smith was 100%, and I knew Keshawn King was 100%, and Malachi Thomas was available, and I knew he was 100%. And I knew Lofton was 100%. And if Silas Janzi hadn't got hurt on Saturday and I knew he was 100%, I would pick Tech.
Do you see this game in terms of setting the tone for the October gauntlet? You win this game, you bring that confidence into UNC and beyond, and you lose, it could get worse.
I'll answer it this way. I think this is the first of, I believe, a 5-game stretch where all the opponents are good. I think the back 4 of those, Tech's going to steal at least one. And I say steal because they go on the road to UNC. Right. They go on the road to Pitt. They go on the road to NC State. And they host Miami.
Yeah.
Those are all, I mean, if you're going to pick them, Tech's not going to win. Maybe UNC.
Right.
But I think that Tech will steal one of those 4. It's a much better look to go into it 2-2, 3-1 than 2-2. Because if you go into that 2-2 and you go 1-3, then you're 3 and let's do the math, 3-5. I'd rather be 4-4 coming out of that with a chance to win, 3 at the end. So I totally forgot what the question was, but it's just a much better vibe going in at 3-1 than 2-2.
I think so. Now that said, I think this team has displayed some mental toughness. Like when they lost to Old Dominion, they didn't let it get them down. They came back and they played a good game against Boston College. They played hard for all 60 minutes. They didn't seem like the ODU loss fazed them too much mentally, or actually didn't seem like it fazed them at all. So I do think this is going to be a mentally stronger football team under Brent Pry. Like, you're not going to see one loss crush them, and you're not going to see one win get them too high, which is what you want. I agree with you about the games after that. Like, if all 4 of those games, if you picked them in the micro individually, Tech would lose them all. But you don't see them losing 4 in a row either when you think about it in the macro sense.
Yeah.
So I do think it's an important game from a win-loss standpoint for the end of the season, for bowl eligibility. Obviously, losing to ODU backed you in a corner. So you gotta steal one somewhere else to make up for that. And I don't think beating West Virginia would be stealing one, because it's a home game against a team with very similar talent, but you got to steal one of those down the line. Now, that being said, it's like, this game's so big, it's West Virginia. It's like, I know we play Carolina, who is another big rivalry for me personally, the very next week, but like, West Virginia game is so big that I'm find it hard to even focus on any of those games after.
I'm not thinking about anything beyond.
I don't even know who we play after North Carolina. Which game is that?
Pitt. I had to think about it this morning. Somebody's like, so what are the next games? I said, well, I know Carolina's October 1st because I'm actually going to see it, so I know that. Yeah. And then this person was like, well, what's after that? And I was like, and he said, Pitt. And I said, oh, yeah, Pitt. So, yeah, I'm not looking beyond September right now. And I think I personally tend to do that every year because lately this is not true, but September tends to be out of conference stuff, where you're trying to figure out what you got. And you think after 3 or 4 games that you got a good idea of what you got before you start the October, November stuff. So September really sets the table, and you're right. I'm locked into it and not really thinking about beyond that.
Well, this game is big in so many ways. We've talked about it all day long. It's big for Grant Wells and his history with the state of West Virginia. It's also big for Brent Pry and the history with growing up in West Virginia, his dad coaching there. Before we kind of close the page on this game, what is the key to the Hokies to get a win on Thursday night?
They've got to find a way to generate some more big plays on offense.
Which gets down to the offensive line, I think.
Yeah, and a healthy Keshawn King breaking tackles.
Yeah.
Because you can't go out there and have 31 carries with your top 2 running backs and them not break a single tackle. That's the big thing. Keep Wells upright and don't turn the ball over. Like, this isn't – West Virginia's offense is so potent that if you turn the ball over, they're going to exploit it and you're going to end up getting smoked.
Yeah, you never really know how penalties and turnovers are going to go.
Correct. They're unpredictable.
And special teams. But putting those things aside, I think the key is the offensive line for Virginia Tech has to play better/well.
Mm-hmm.
If the offense can't get rolling, I think we're going to be having a disappointing conversation here on Monday.
You're going to be talking 30-13 or something like that, West Virginia, I think, if the O-line doesn't, if the offense doesn't get going.
Because I think every week we're looking at, is the offense going to improve? Is the wide receivers going to get more separation? How are we in the run game? Things like that. But on to game picks. So Will and David now 2-1, Chris at 1-2. Similar to the BC game picks, Will and David got the Hokies. Chris does not. David's pick was interesting, like we alluded to earlier. He thinks Will Ross kicks a game winner. Will, you also had a really close game, 30-28.
Yeah, I wasn't going to put it on Will Ross to kick a game winner, but I do have a 2-point game, and
so that implies a field goal at some point.
What did I pick Tech to score? 30. That's 3 field goals.
Yeah. Well, or
a missed extra point and a field goal or something like that.
Who knows?
Yeah. So
I'll take 15 safeties. It'd be fine with me. But you said 30 is the key.
Yes.
And
then I planted my flag there.
Yeah, you sure did.
This is a separation game for the TSL staff because David and I are 2-1. Chris is 1-2.
Yeah, I either catch up or I'm down by 2.
Or he falls way behind because Chris did. I picked with the heart. I think Chris picked with his head, and he did pick.
I always pick with my head.
I go back and forth.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
I picked West Virginia to win because there's more guarantees with the West Virginia roster. I don't know of any injuries that they have or anything like that outside of their starting corner who's really good, but their offensive playmakers seem to be healthy. And like I said, if I knew Virginia Tech's top playmakers were going to be healthy, I would pick Tech, but we don't know that, and there's so much unknown, and I don't make picks based on unknown. I will say that you're either going to have an really exhilarating feeling on Thursday night or you're going to have a horrible feeling. All right, so from a horrible feeling standpoint, it's not that losing the trophy is big. I don't want to lose any trophy, of course, but at least if we lost the Commonwealth Cup to UVA this year, it would suck. But, you get a chance to win it back next year. If we don't get the Black Diamond Trophy back on Thursday night, we may never get a chance to get it back again.
Not in my lifetime. I'm only 57.
And imagine going the rest of your life with West Virginia fans knowing that they've got that trophy in their trophy room and they never have to give it back to Virginia. Collecting dust and never having it.
Because it never moves.
If you're an old school Virginia Tech fan, that thought should absolutely sicken you. Now, on the other standpoint of it, if Virginia Tech wins that trophy the other night, on Thursday night, it's going to be a long time, if ever, that West Virginia will get a chance to win it back. And I know that would kill their fans. That would sicken their fans just as much as it would sicken me the other way around. Now, that being said, win or lose, I want to keep playing the game.
Yeah.
I mean, I just think this is what college football is all about. You take away the fun factors of it, and guess what? It's not as fun anymore. You take away Stick It In, you take away West Virginia, and whatever else will get taken away through the years. I'm just, win or lose, I'm in favor of continuing to play it. But it's if Virginia Tech doesn't win and there's no game on the future schedule, and you think you may never have a chance to win that thing back, it's going to hurt. I think it was easy for Tech fans after 2005 to be like, yeah, the series is canceled, woohoo, because we had
the trophy.
All right, we'll see how you feel on Friday morning if Tech doesn't have the trophy.
Yeah, it's important to get the trophy back. It kind of reminds me of the COVID year because UVA had won the Commonwealth Cup the year before. And if you remember the COVID year and all the weird scheduling that happened with that, our game with UVA was in jeopardy of not being played, yet they were going to keep it for 2 years if that was going to happen because it got canceled 3 times in a row or something.
It was going to be the first game of the season.
It was the first or second. I remember watching ACC Network and the COVID schedule comes out and we play them the second
I think it was going to be NC State, and that got canceled. And then it was going to be UVA, and that got canceled, and then finally it was NC State again.
Right? Yeah. So let's look at how the fans are voting. Not a lot of votes in so far, 380. And 42% of Tech fans have Tech winning by 1-10.
Yep.
33% have WVU winning by 1-10. So that's 75% that put it in that one score territory.
2% of people had Wofford winning last week. That was 28 votes for Wofford winning. I think they did that just to troll us or us UVA fans or something. I don't know.
Now, only 5% think Tech's going to win by 11 plus.
That would be awesome.
There's actually 20% of votes for WVU to win by 11 plus. So at this point, it's 53% to 47% pick WVU to win.
So Tech fans either think Tech is going to win close, or there's a decent chance West Virginia wins by double digits.
Or there are some WVU fans who have found their way in.
That's certainly possible.
There's always that going on.
Right. The preview article came out this morning, so not a lot of movement there yet. If you haven't read it, make sure you go and do that. Talked a lot about football today. I'm sure there's questions in the chat, Jake, so let's get to some of those.
There are a few good questions in here. Let's start with David Tracy. Chris, he wants to know that if the offensive line struggles have anything to do with the new offensive scheme or whether it's more of just a talent problem.
I think it's some of it, and I think some of it is it's a pin and pull style scheme, and it's not like Tech hasn't done any of that before, but it seems to be very prominent now. As I said, Jancy is a guy in the past who's been probably more effective as just blocking down on the guy in front of him or the side of him than he has been pulling. So some of it could be asking guys to do things that they aren't particularly suited for. And it'll be interesting to see if Virginia Tech goes against any of their tendencies. Like, I don't think it's a talent issue amongst the starters because, like I said, we've seen all these guys play good football in the past. They've proven that they can do it. Now, some players are just so talented that they can play in any system. Others are just talented enough that they're talented players, but there's certain things they're not suited for. Yeah. Like Norrell Pollard on defense is a perfect example. I think he's a really, really good player in this scheme and in Bud Foster's scheme. He probably played better than he should have in Justin Hamilton's scheme, in all honesty. But he's much better suited for this scheme. So Tim Settle's probably your one defensive tackle that Tech has ever recruited that would have been a great player in both schemes. Can play in anything. We'll see. It's too early to tell because there's still a lot of adjustments. But I'll be honest, I have been disappointed because of just guys that have played a decent number of snaps. And I get that a couple of those guys were only sophomores, but they played significant snaps last year and played well. Plenty of time to turn it around, but they're further behind than I thought they would be.
We have one more. It's from Blake, Will, and Chris. Can you remember a time that the fan base was this excited for an unranked non-conference matchup in Sideline Stadium?
Unranked non-conference matchup.
Non-conference.
Man,
I'm drawing a blank. I'd have to look at a list of games.
It's tough because usually the big ones, it's like number 1 Ohio State's coming to town or something like that.
The last time West Virginia played here, they were 6th in the country.
Yes.
My brain goes to the 2012 Florida State game, but that's a conference match.
Nebraska was ranked in 2009. No, if he's got an answer for that,
does he have an idea?
I don't think he does. I think that was why he asked it.
I think maybe was West Virginia ranked in 94 when they came in on Thursday night?
I don't think so.
Okay, maybe something like that. There were some games, maybe like there were night games back in the day, like 96, like maybe East Carolina. I don't know if they were ranked, but that was a big game. I remember it sleeted during that game and everything.
Yeah.
Still a lot of people there.
That's going way back,
though. Absolutely. Non-conference, man.
It's good food for thought. It makes me want to go look at our schedules.
Was A&M ranked in 2003 when they came in? I know they ended up having a horrible year. Like they weren't ranked, so that probably A&M in 2003.
So that's probably
off the top of my head. Yeah. Hurricane game, and it was a big name program in A&M. But they only went like 4-8 that year. They weren't any good, but because of their name and the fact that it was a night game and it was in a hurricane, it's crazy. Like the place was packed during a hurricane. It's hard to imagine.
Yeah, it does seem crazy to think that there's so much anticipation for this game. It's going to be a packed crowd for a team that's 1-2 and not in our conference. But
when Notre Dame has come in here, they've been ranked each time, right?
I believe so.
Yeah. Goodness, Carolina was ranked Carolina was a conference opponent. Duh.
I am not finding it. I'm scrolling down, and
it's a good question.
It's got to be A&M, right? I would think that would be A&M.
Well, nobody wants to listen to a podcast while I'm scrolling through.
Right.
Okay.
So we'll just
East Carolina 2007 because it was the first game after April 16th.
There we go.
But that's kind of a special case scenario, of course. Yeah. So if you threw that out, then I think it would be A&M.
All right, well, before we get out of here, game previews posted on TechSideline.com as of this morning. Make sure you go vote in the poll if you haven't yet. Tech Talk Live tomorrow night, so notes should be coming out about that. Anything else to look for?
I think I'm going to do instead of, obviously, I'll be writing a column on Friday, so my normal Friday Q&A will be on Wednesday this week. Brandon Patterson will have his video preview tomorrow. And other than that, man, it's just get ready. It's almost time.
Yeah, so come on by and check things out. If all you ever do is listen to the podcast, as I always say, we got a whole website attached to this thing. It's actually what we started with. A lot of really excellent written content. I'm biased, but I think we have the best staff of writers covering Virginia Tech athletics. There are some other good writers that cover Virginia Tech, but I think as far as the amount of writing talent in one place, this is it.
We certainly have the biggest staff.
Yes,
we're like
we have
the
a large
Alabama
staff.
of Virginia Tech athletics. We got more staff members in this one room right now than anybody else has working for their entire sites.
That's right. And so for the monthly subscriptions, first month is free, and for students, student subscriptions are free. So check it out.
Nice. Well, another great episode of the Tech Sideline podcast. I want to thank everybody on set today. David Cunningham was in the first half. I wanted to make sure I mentioned this. I just went and checked his Twitter. He's 2 followers away from 9,000.
What?
So
Please give David 2 more Twitter followers.
if you're listening to this and you don't follow him, he's at the Real D. Kinda. Make sure you do that. Will Stewart, founder and general manager of Tech Sideline. You can
I'm
follow
at
him.
12,000 followers. David's going to catch me
Nice.
one. He's going to catch me. Yeah.
Well, if you don't follow Will, make sure you follow him at Will Stewart TSL. Chris Coleman, lead analyst and columnist for Tech Sideline. He's at Chris Coleman TSL. Jake Lyman, hosting the first half of the podcast, did a great job with that and his contributions in the fourth chair during the second half. Jack Brizendine producing, did a great job with Nick Brown shadowing over. Hokies take the field for Game 4 against West Virginia in the battle for the Black Diamond Trophy on Thursday night at 7:30 p.m. in Lane Stadium. Renewing this rivalry in Blacksburg for the first time in 18 years. It's shaping up to be a good one. We'll be back Monday morning to break it all down. I'm Katie Adams signing off from all of us here at Tech Sideline. Enjoy the game, Hokies fans, and enjoy your weekend.